Hi guys, and welcome to America History Tales. Tonight we stand at the edge of a northern forest in the winter of 1903, with snow rising around your boots and darkness gathering between the trees. The wind presses cold fingers through every seam in your coat. Somewhere ahead, hidden beyond the white blur, a timber camp waits with a hot stove, rough bunks, strong coffee, and perhaps just enough shelter to keep you breathing until morning. Perhaps, because this is not a pleasant weekend retreat with matching blankets and a polite sign asking you to conserve towels. Out here, you probably won't survive this if you wander off the trail, lose your footing, or decide that frostbite sounds like an interesting character-building exercise. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the storm closes around you, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is there. Perhaps you are warm in bed, which already makes you wiser than most people in this camp. Now, dim the lights and step carefully into the snow. You arrive by a narrow logging road that barely deserves the name. In summer, it is likely a trough of mud, roots, horse droppings, and broken branches. Tonight, it is a pale channel winding through black spruce and pine, already disappearing beneath fresh snow. Your boots sink with every step. The leather is stiff. The soles are studded with metal pegs for grip, though they seem mainly designed to remind you that comfort has not yet been invented. Ahead, the teamster leans forward on the supply sleigh. His shoulders form a hunched dark shape beneath a heavy wool jacket. Two horses pull through the deepening drift, their breath bursting in clouds. Harness rings clink softly, leather creaks. The runners whisper over packed snow with a dry, steady hiss. You keep close because there is nowhere else sensible to be. In 1903, winter logging camps across the northern United States and Canada depend on horses, sled roads, and frozen ground. Winter is not merely an inconvenience, it makes the work possible. Logs weighing hundreds or even thousands of pounds can be moved more easily over snow and ice than through summer mud. Some crews flood haul roads at night, creating hard tracks for loaded sleds. That sounds efficient until you imagine walking beside one. The road is slick beneath the snow. Your feet slide, recover, then slide again. The teamster does not look back. Perhaps your struggle is mildly entertaining. The forest closes around the road like a wall. Trunks stand dark, their branches burdened with white. The air smells of resin, wet wool, and horse sweat. Each breath pinches your nose. Your moustache, should you possess one, begins collecting frost. Paintings rarely include this small indignity. The camp is still invisible, but signs of it appear. A stump rises beside the trail, its top cut flat and pale. Then another. Chips lie frozen beneath the snow, bright curls of wood where the wind has swept the surface bare. You pass a felled trunk half buried in a drift. Branches trimmed away, bark scarred by chains. The men here are called lumberjacks, woodsmen, shantymen, or simply loggers, French Canadians, Scandinavians, Irishmen, Finns, and farm boys move through these camps in seasonal waves. Some return yearly, others come because crops failed, factories slowed, or debts gathered. You trudge in their tracks. Snow taps against your coat in fine grains. It gathers on your shoulders, melts from your body heat, then freezes again. The layers beneath your jacket are wool, because wool keeps some warmth even when damp. Cotton would be a poor companion here. A wet cotton shirt in this cold becomes less clothing than an apology. The team pauses where the road bends around cedar. One horse snorts and stamps. The teamster climbs down, checks a trace, and mutters something soothing. You cannot make out the words through the wind. For a moment, everything is still except the trees. Then a deep crack rolls through the forest. You freeze. It may be a limb breaking under snow or a trunk splitting in the cold. In a silent forest, such sounds travel far. One old belief claims that certain trees cry out before they fall. Another says a tree groaning at night remembers the axe. No one here laughs too loudly at such ideas after dark. A quirky detail of camp life is that some woodsmen chew spruce gum cut from hardened sap on trees. It may arrive with bark, insects, and other natural additions that modern packaging departments would reject. Men claim it helps against thirst. It does not, sadly, make the weather warmer. The teamster climbs back onto the sleigh. The horses lean into their collars. You begin moving again. Historians still argue whether the popular image of the carefree, boastful lumberjack reflects real camp culture or a romantic version created later by songs, advertisements, and tall tales. The men certainly joke, sing, and exaggerate. Yet the work is disciplined, repetitive, and dangerous. A careless movement can crush a foot, break a leg, or leave a man stranded far from medical help. You begin to understand why the trail feels serious. There are no electric lights ahead, no heated motor car, and no phone glowing uselessly in your pocket. The camp survives through preparation, habit, and cooperation among people who prefer not to freeze alone. The snow thickens. It no longer falls straight down. It sweeps sideways between the trunks, curling around your legs in pale ribbons. The horses become dim shapes. The sleigh lantern throws a small amber circle that illuminates every snowflake and nothing beyond them. You lower your head and watch the teamster's tracks. One step, then another. Your calves ache. Your toes are beginning to lose their distinct identities. You wiggle them inside your boots. A small private inventory, still there, apparently, good. At last, a smell reaches you through the storm. Wood smoke. It is faint at first, almost imagined, then stronger. The scent drifts low between the trees, warm and bitter, carrying hints of green pine and damp bark. You lift your head. A glow appears ahead. Lanterns burn near rough buildings in a clearing. Chimney smoke flattens in the wind. You hear a dog bark, a man call, "Ah, yeah," and an axe strike wood with a hollow knock. The camp emerges slowly, as if the forest has decided to reveal it only after testing you. You pass stacks of split firewood, a blacksmith shed, and low storehouses nearly buried to their windows. Men move between buildings with collars raised and hats pulled down. They look practiced and thoroughly unimpressed by the weather. Someone notices you beside the new man, he says. There is no welcome speech. You step into the clearing, where the wind has room to gather speed. Snow stings your cheeks. Behind you, the road is already fading beneath fresh powder. Ahead, beyond the cookhouse smoke and dim lanterns, stands the bunkhouse that must carry you through the night. And the storm is only beginning. You cross the clearing with your head lowered, following the faint path beaten between the buildings. Snow gathers in the folds of your coat and clings to the wool at your wrists. Every gust seems to arrive from a new direction, as though the storm is circling the camp and testing each wall in turn. The bunkhouse stands near the far edge of the clearing, a long, low building, with a roof pitched steeply enough to shed heavy snow. It is not beautiful. No carpenter has added decorative trim. No one has planted flowers beside the door. The structure exists for one purpose, which is to keep a large number of tired workers alive, dry and reasonably contained until morning. Its walls are made from rough logs, fitted together and sealed with moss, clay, or scraps of wood. In places, the chinking has cracked. Thin lines of darkness show between the timbers, and powdery snow has collected against the lower wall. You pause several yards away and study it. The roof is buried beneath a thick white layer. Snow curls over the eaves in soft lips, bending downward but not yet falling. A narrow chimney rises from one end, breathing sparks and smoke into the wind. The smoke should rise, but tonight it tumbles sideways and disappears among the trees. 2 small windows glow faintly. Their glass is cloudy with frost and smoke. One pane has been repaired with a strip of wood, another with something that looks suspiciously like oiled cloth. Warm orange light trembles behind them, interrupted when a man passes inside. The sight is deeply comforting. It is also slightly alarming. A bunkhouse window in 1903 is not designed to provide a sweeping forest view. Glass is expensive, heat escapes quickly, and privacy is not a major concern when dozens of men sleep in the same room. The windows are small because small windows waste less warmth. They may open in theory, although in this weather the frost has probably sealed them shut. A wooden sign hangs near the entrance. Snow covers most of the lettering. You brush it with your mitten and uncover the camp name, carved unvainly into the plank beneath it. Someone has scratched a joke about the cook. The final word has been cut away, perhaps by the cook himself. A dog appears from beneath the bunkhouse steps. It is a thick-coated camp animal with one torn ear, and the patient expression of a creature that has watched many newcomers arrive with confidence and leave with fewer opinions. It sniffs your boots, circles once, and decides you are neither food nor danger. You are accepted, which is more than some workers receive on their first night. Across the clearing, the teamster begins unloading sacks and boxes from the sleigh. Flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, lamp oil, and mail all arrive by this route during a severe storm. A camp can be cut off for days. Supplies are counted carefully because appetite does not pause for weather. Logging camps are often located far from established towns, sometimes miles from the nearest railway or navigable road. A winter camp may include a bunkhouse, cookhouse, office, barn, blacksmith shop and storage sheds. Larger operations resemble small temporary villages, built quickly and abandoned when the nearby timber is gone. You look around and see that temporary does not mean careless. Paths are kept clear where possible. Firewood is stacked near doors. Tools are stored under cover. Horses are led toward the stable before ice can form on their harness. Every movement has a reason. A man carrying an armful of split wood passes you and jerks his chin toward the bunkhouse. "Don't block the door," he says. The camp appears to have completed its welcome ceremony. You step aside. The man climbs the short stairs, kicks snow from his boots, and enters without knocking. A wash of yellow light spills across the steps. For a second, you hear voices, laughter, and the metallic clatter of a stove door. Then the heavy door closes, and the sounds become muffled again. You remain outside for another moment. The cabin wall is dark with age and smoke. Axe marks show where the logs were squared. Near one corner, a narrow wooden trough carries meltwater away from the roof. It is clogged with ice. A long icicle hangs beside it, clear and sharp. Some camp bunkhouses are made from logs cut directly at the site. Others use rough boards from nearby sawmills. The design varies by region, company wealth, and season. What matters is speed, heat, and enough floor space to hold bunks. Comfort arrives somewhere much lower on the list. A peculiar bunkhouse custom in some camps is the use of a deacon seat, a long bench placed near the stove where men sit to dry clothing, sharpen tools, or tell stories. The name sounds respectable, though the conversations held there are not always suitable for church. You can already imagine that bench inside, crowded with steaming socks and strong opinions. The wind pushes against your back. Snow slips beneath your collar. That settles the question of whether to keep admiring the architecture. Before you reach the door, the foreman steps from the office building nearby. He is broad, bearded, and dressed in a heavy coat darkened by wet snow. A watch chain disappears beneath his vest. He carries a clipboard under one arm, protected by waxed cloth. He asks your name, your experience, and whether you have worked a crosscut saw. You answer honestly, or at least with the kind of honesty that still hopes to be hired. His expression does not change. Camp foremen must know who can fell trees. drive horses, repair roads, sharpen saws, and survive long hours in severe cold. A worker who exaggerates his skill can endanger everyone around him. There is little patience for dramatic self-discovery beneath a falling pine. The foreman gives you a short list of rules. Meals happen at fixed times. Tools return to their proper places. No open flame near the button. No fighting inside. No boots on another man's bedding. And when the morning call comes, you rise immediately, you nod. These rules sound simple, but simple rules govern crowded places. A bunkhouse holds many personalities within a narrow wooden shell. Discipline protects sleep, food, equipment, and peace. Researchers continue to disagree about how strictly company rules were enforced across different camps. Some accounts describe harsh, nearly military order. Others remember looser communities where experienced workers controlled behaviour through teasing, reputation, and collective pressure. The truth probably changes from camp to camp, and perhaps from foreman to foreman. This foreman looks like a man who enjoys neither teasing nor debate. He points toward the door. Find an empty bunk. Supper soon. Then he turns away. You climb the steps. The boards creak beneath your weight. Snow falls from your coat in soft clumps. Beside the entrance stands a barrel with several axe handles leaning against it. A row of snowshoes hangs from wooden pegs, their rawhide webbing stiff with frost. One pair is repaired with wire. Another has a small red ribbon tied near the heel. Perhaps it helps the owner recognize them. Perhaps it is lucky. In a camp where every mitten, cup, and blanket resembles the next, a strip of colour becomes a claim of ownership. You place one hand on the door latch. It is cold enough to bite through your mitten. From inside comes the smell of hot iron, damp wool, tobacco, leather, and human bodies. It is not the fragrance of luxury, but after the frozen trail it seems almost heavenly. The dog settles beneath the steps behind you. The storm moves through the clearing, erasing your footprints. You lift the latch, and the heavy door begins to open. The door opens against a wall of warm, heavy air. For one instant, you stand between two climates. Behind you, the storm drives snow across the clearing. Before you, heat rolls from the iron stove and carries the dense smell of wet wool, leather, pine smoke, tobacco, sweat, soap, and something frying far away in the cookhouse. Several men glance toward you. No one rises. You step inside and pull the door shut with both hands. The wind resists, then gives way. The latch drops into place with a solid wooden click, and the storm becomes a muffled roar beyond the walls. Snow begins melting on your shoulders immediately. Drops slide from the brim of your cap. Your coat darkens as the frozen crust softens. Beneath your boots, the floorboards are damp and scarred, polished by years of mud, hobnails, and hurried winter footsteps. The room is longer than it appeared from outside. Bunks line both walls in two rough tiers, leaving a central passage that leads toward the stove. Blankets hang from bed frames. Socks dangle from pegs. Mittens rest near the heat like small, exhausted animals. The men inside are equally varied. One has a red beard spread across his chest. Another is narrow and grey, with a face like folded leather. A younger worker sits on a lower bunk, rubbing grease into a pair of boots near the stove. Two French-Canadian men speak quietly while a broad-shouldered Finn sharpens a knife on a whetstone. You hear English, French, Swedish, and perhaps a language you do not recognise. Logging camps in 1903 often bring together migrant labourers from many regions. Some men come from nearby farms during the winter. Others travel between timber districts, following seasonal work from camp to camp. In the northern woods, a bunkhouse can become a small, temporary world shaped by several languages and customs. That world is watching you remove your coat. You begin with the scarf. It has frozen into a stiff curve around your neck. You tug at the knot, but your mittened fingers have become clumsy. A man near the door reaches over, loosens it with one pull, and returns to his seat without comment. You mutter thanks. He nods once. The coat comes next. It is heavier than when you started. Soaked with melted snow, hang it from a wooden peg beside several others. They press together in a thick row, dripping onto the floor. Then you remove your mittens. Your fingers are pale and stiff. As warmth returns, they begin to sting. The sensation starts softly, then grows sharp, as though each finger has developed a personal complaint. You resist the urge to place your hands directly against the stove. Rapid heating can hurt badly. And experienced woodsmen know better than to warm frozen skin too fast. Instead, you hold your hands near the heat and flex them slowly. The iron stove stands in the centre of the room, black, broad and glowing faintly at the seams. A stovepipe climbs toward the roof, bends once and disappears through a metal collar in the ceiling. Split logs are stacked nearby. A dented kettle trembles on top. The stove is the heart of the bunkhouse. Everything depends on it. Clothing dries around it. Water heats upon it. Men gather beside it after work. At night, its fire separates uncomfortable sleep from dangerous cold. It also fills the room with smoke whenever the draft turns badly. Your eyes begin to water. A thin blue haze hangs near the rafters. The men seem accustomed to it. One smokes a pipe beneath a sign that warns against careless flame, which suggests that rules, like weather forecasts, are interpreted with some flexibility. The man greasing his boots looks up. "New fellow," he says. "You confirm this." "Wet fellow," he adds. "This is also difficult to deny." He points toward a narrow space near the wall, where several pairs of boots stand on a plank. You understand that you are expected to remove yours before spreading more snow and mud across the sleeping area. You sit on a rough bench. Your boots do not wish to leave your feet. The leather has stiffened, the laces have tightened, and your wool socks feel attached to the lining. You pull one heel free, then the other, producing two damp sounds that attract a quiet snort of amusement from somewhere behind you. Your socks are wet at the toes. This is not ideal. You peel them off and place them near the stove, though not too near. A sock laid directly against hot iron can scorch, shrink, or begin smoking. Such an event would provide the bunkhouse with entertainment, but not the kind you wish to supply on your first evening. Many workers carry spare wool socks because dry feet are essential in winter logging. Boots may be stuffed with paper, dry grass, or cloth overnight to absorb moisture. Foot care sounds humble compared with felling giant trees. Yet a blister or frostbitten toe can end a season of work. You rub your feet and pull on a dry pair. The relief is immediate, warmth spreads slowly through the wool. Your toes return one by one, each announcing itself with pins and needles. A quirky practice in some camps involves sprinkling pepper or powdered mustard into boots, supposedly to encourage warmth. Whether this helps is uncertain. It certainly gives the feet a more dramatic personality. You decide not to ask whether anyone here recommends it. The bench creaks beneath you. Around the room, men continue their quiet routines. One sews a torn mitten with thick thread, another combs ice from his beard, a third lies fully dressed on a bunk with his cap over his eyes. Already asleep despite the voices and stove noises, the bunkhouse has no private corners. Every cough, sigh, scratch, and muttered word belongs to everyone. Clothing hangs in public, boots steam in public. Exhaustion happens in public. Privacy is reduced to turning your face toward the wall. Some accounts portray logging bunkhouses as filthy, chaotic places where men slept among vermin and damp straw. Others describe well-managed camps with regular cleaning, strict bedding rules, and surprisingly orderly routines. Scholars still debate whether the worst descriptions represent normal conditions or memorable exceptions recorded because they were so unpleasant. This camp appears to sit somewhere in the middle. The floor has been swept, but not recently. The blankets look thick, but not clean. The air is warm. but it has been breathed many times. A man near the stove lifts the kettle and pours water into a tin basin. Steam rises around his face. He washes his hands, splashes water over his neck, then dries himself with a cloth that may once have been white beside him. Another worker trims his fingernails with a pocket knife. You look away. On the wall, pegs hold suspenders, belts, caps, and small cloth bags. A few men keep personal belongings in wooden boxes beneath their bunks. Most own little that cannot be carried. A photograph, a letter, a razor, a Bible, a deck of cards, perhaps a lucky coin. The red-bearded man stands and points toward the rear corner. Wash basin there. Don't use the drinking bucket. A sensible distinction. 2 buckets sit side by side. One is marked with a carved X, the other is not. You hope you remember which is which. You wash your face in cold water. The skin on your cheeks burns as feeling returns. Melted snow and road grit run into the basin. You smooth your hair, though no one appears impressed by grooming, when you turn back. The room seems less hostile. Not friendly exactly, but less hostile. You're no longer a shape in the doorway. You're another damp man standing in wool socks beside the stove, trying not to touch anything that belongs to someone larger. Outside, the wind strikes the wall with a low boom. The windows tremble in their frames. Inside, the stove snaps and settles. A log shifts. Sparks whisper upward through the pipe. The man with the greased boots nods toward the rows of bunks. "Find one before supper," he says. "The good ones go first." You look along the crowded walls. Every bed appears narrow. Several appear occupied. One seems to sag alarmingly in the middle. Still, somewhere among the straw mattresses and folded blankets, a place waits for you. You pick up your small bag and begin walking deeper into the bunkhouse. You move along the central aisle with your bag held close to your leg, studying the bunks as discreetly as possible. This is difficult because every man in the room knows exactly what you are doing. You are searching for the least miserable bed. The lower bunks look easier to enter, but they're closer to the cold floor, the mud, and the boots. The upper bunks catch more heat from the stove, though they also catch more smoke. Some sag in the middle, others tilt toward the wall. One has a blanket so thin that it seems to have been included mainly as a cruel joke. You pass a bunk with a carved name on the frame. Another has a pair of suspenders tied across the opening, a clear sign that the space is claimed. A third contains a sleeping man whose boots stick into the aisle. He snores once, opens one eye, sees you, and resumes snoring without moving. At the far end of the room, you find an empty lower bunk beneath a smaller upper one. The frame is made from rough timber, darkened by years of hands, smoke, and boot grease. A straw mattress rests across wooden slats. On top lies a folded grey blanket and a lumpy pillow covered in coarse cloth. You press one hand into the mattress. It crackles. The straw shifts beneath your palm and produces a faint dusty smell. Not unpleasant exactly, but strongly agricultural. You press again. Something sharp pokes through the fabric. A stem, you hope. The red-bearded man watches from near the stove. "That one's open," he says, "unless Charlie comes back." You ask where Charlie has gone. The man shrugs. This does not provide the reassurance you are seeking. Seasonal logging camps often assigned bunks on arrival, though in many places experienced workers quietly claim the best positions. A bed near the stove promised warmth but also smoke, noise, and the risk of sparks. One near the door offered fresher air but invited a freezing draft each time someone entered. Your bunk is halfway between both problems, a fine compromise. You set your bag beneath the frame, but the man above you leans down at once. "Not there," he says. His face appears upside down over the edge. He has a narrow chin and a knitted cap pulled over his ears. You pause. He points to a line scratched into the floorboard. Your side stops there. The line is barely visible, but it is treated with the seriousness of a national border. You shift your bag several inches. He nods and disappears again. In a crowded bunkhouse, personal territory is measured carefully. A peg, a shelf, a nail, half a box, and the floor beneath a bed may be all a man can call his own. Crossing those invisible boundaries can cause more irritation than the cold. You begin arranging your few possessions. A spare shirt goes beneath the pillow. Your small washcloth hangs from a nail. You place your cap beside the blanket, then move it when you notice the upper bunk dripping melted snow through a crack in the boards. The man above peers down once more. Roof leaks there. You thank him for mentioning this only after your cap becomes damp. He says nothing. The bedding demands inspection. You lift the blanket and shake it lightly. Dust rises in a thin cloud. Several men look over, then quickly look away, which is not encouraging. The straw mattress is enclosed in a rough ticking cover. It has been patched twice with fabric of different colours. You run your fingers along the seam, searching for movement. None. For now. Bedbugs, lice, and fleas are common concerns in crowded 19th and early 20th century lodging. Logging camps are no exception. Some camps boil bedding, air mattresses outdoors, or use kerosene, sulphur, and strong soap against pests. Success varies. A lesser-known bunkhouse trick is to rub pine tar or tobacco juice along bed joints in the belief that it discourages insects. Whether the insects are discouraged or merely offended remains unclear. You sniff the frame. It smells faintly of tar. Perhaps someone has tried. You place the blanket back down. It is thick wool, coarse enough to scratch through clothing. The edges are worn, and one corner bears a stitch number. Company property. Losing it would probably cost part of your wages. The pillow is filled with straw or hay. When you lift it, the contents slide heavily to one end. You punch it twice. Flatten it. Then fold it in half. The result resembles a small sack of grain. Luxury remains elusive. You sit on the edge of the bunk. The wooden frame creaks beneath you. The mattress settles unevenly, lifting one knee higher than the other. You adjust your weight and discover a hollow in the centre shaped by whoever slept here before. Charlie. Perhaps. You wonder whether Charlie was broad, restless, or simply permanent. Surviving accounts differ sharply on this quality of bunkhouse bedding. Some former loggers remembered clean straw. Ticks changed regularly and thick blankets supplied by the company. Others recalled damp mattresses, vermin, and blankets never washed from one season to the next. The variation may reflect real differences between prosperous camps and poorly managed operations. This blanket looks capable of supporting either argument. You remove your dry socks from near the stove and place them at the foot of the bed. Your boots remain on the drying plank. You tie their laces together, a common precaution when many pairs look alike. The man with the greased boots notices. Good, he says. Last fellow wore mine for 3 days. You ask whether it was an accident. He considers this. No. Nearby. A younger worker marks his belongings with a small notch cut into the wood. Another wraps a strip of blue yarn around the handle of his cup. A man on the upper tier keeps his pipe in a leather pouch tied directly to the bedpost. Objects are simple, but ownership is not. Your bunk includes one wooden peg. You hang your shirt from it. A hand reaches down from above and removes the shirt. That peg's mine. You look up. The narrow face appears again. You already have 2, you say. He looks toward the wall, as though checking the legal record. One's for coat, one's for trousers. That one's for towel. You search for another peg. There is none. The red-bearded man calls from across the room. Give the new man half a peg. Nils. Several men chuckle. Nils studies you upside down, then shifts his towel to one side. You can use the end. This tiny concession feels strangely meaningful. You hang the shirt carefully, keeping it several inches from his towel. The room continues changing around you as men return from the storm. Each new arrival brings snow, cold air, wet clothing, and another layer of sound. Boots thump, buckles click. Someone coughs deeply. Someone else begins humming a slow tune. Your bunk becomes an island amid the movement. You smooth the blanket. You place your bag squarely beneath the frame inside the scratched boundary. You test the pillow once more. You check that no water drips directly onto your face. Then you notice initials carved into the bed rail. There are dozens. Some are deep and careful. Others are shallow scratches made with a hurried knife. Dates appear beside a few names. 1897, 1900, 1902. Men have slept here before you, men who arrived wet and tired, claimed the same narrow space and listened to winter press against the walls. Perhaps one left for another camp. Perhaps one returned to a farm. Perhaps one simply vanished from company records. You trace one set of initials with your thumb. For all its discomfort, the bunk offers something you have wanted since stepping into the clearing. A place, not much of one, barely wide enough for your shoulders, poorly padded, shared with insects that may or may not respect borders. But yours for tonight. You lie back experimentally. The straw crackles beneath your head. The upper frame is only a short distance above your face. Nils shifts, and dust falls through the slats onto your blanket. You close your eyes. From the stove comes the pop of burning pine. From the windows comes the soft hiss of driven snow. From the cookhouse, faint through the wall and storm. A bell begins to ring. Every man in the bunkhouse moves at once. Supper. You sit up quickly, strike your forehead against the bunk above, and learn your first lesson about personal space. Nils peers over the edge. You'll remember now, he says. You rub your head, reach for your coat, and follow the others toward the door. You rise with the rest of the room, though the supper bell still echoes faintly beyond the walls. For a moment, everyone seems ready to rush outside. Then several older men pause near the stove, glance toward the windows, and decide there is no reason to meet the storm before absolutely necessary. You make the same wise decision. The iron stove glows at the center of the bunkhouse, its black sides radiating a deep, steady heat. Men gather around it in a loose ring, turning first one shoulder, then the other toward the warmth. Steam rises from coats, meltwater darkens the floorboards. The room smells more strongly now of wool, leather, smoke, and thawing bodies. Your forehead still aches from the bunk frame. Nils sits on the long bench beside the stove and notices you rub in the sore spot. "Cabin kissed you," he says. You ask whether that happens often. "Only once," he replies. After that, man learns, this is probably the closest thing to medical advice you will receive tonight. You find a place near the stove, careful not to stand too close. The heat feels wonderful against your face, but the backs of your legs remain cold. You turn slowly, like a roast being handled by an uncertain cook, around you. Wet clothing begins to change texture. Mittens soften, boot leather relaxes. Frozen trouser cuffs release small beads of water. A pair of wool socks hangs from a wire above the stove, twisting gently in the rising heat. They drip onto the iron top with tiny hisses. The owner of the socks sits nearby, watching them with complete concentration. No one trusts unattended clothing near a hot stove. Pine burns quickly and brightly, sending sharp pops through the firebox. A man opens the stove door and pushes in another split log. Orange light spills across his hands and beard. Spark jump, then vanish. He closes the door with a clang. The bunkhouse settles again. In camps like this, the stove is more than a source of warmth. It organizes the room. The best seats belong to men who have earned them through seniority, habit, or pure stubbornness. New arrivals stand at the edge until a space opens. You remain standing. A small man with a grey moustache occupies nearly half the bench. He is not especially large, but his elbows have established territorial control. Beside him sits the red-bearded worker, who holds a tin cup between both hands. The cup contains coffee, or something dark enough to claim the title. He lifts it toward you. "Cookhouse batch," he says, "from afternoon." You accept the cup and take a cautious sip. The coffee is bitter, smoky, and warm. It tastes as if the grounds have been boiled several times and personally insulted. Still, heat spreads down your throat and into your chest. You take another sip. Logging camps consumed remarkable quantities of coffee. It was inexpensive, easy to store, and useful during cold mornings and long work days. Camp cooks often boiled it in large pots, sometimes adding crushed eggshells or a splash of cold water to help settle the grounds. This cup contains enough grounds to suggest the settling process has failed. You return it with thanks. The red-bearded man drinks from the same rim without hesitation. Personal cups are preferred, but cold camps encourage practical flexibility. Near the stove, a worker named Emil removes the felt liners from his boots. He places them upright on the bench and stuffs each with dry newspaper. You watch with interest, pulls the wet. He explains. Newspaper reaches remote camps through supply shipments, old mail, and company offices. After being read, it becomes insulation, boot stuffing, fire starter, packing materials, and occasionally toilet paper. Though no one discusses that use near the stove. Emil holds up a page. The headline concerns politics from several weeks ago. He looks at it, shrugs, and pushes it into his boot. News travels slowly here, seeing, and usefulness and eventually defeats importance. A less familiar camp habit involves warming smooth stones on the stove, wrapping them in cloth, and placing them near the feet at bedtime. The method can provide comfort, but only if the stone is warm rather than scorching. One careless sleeper reportedly burned a hole through his blanket and blamed a mouse. The men near the stove seem to find this story believable, not because of the mouse, because of the blanket. You move closer as another space opens. The stove heat reaches through your clothes and loosens the stiffness in your shoulders. The sensation is so pleasant that you almost forget the snow outside. Almost. The wind presses against the wall with a low, rolling sound. Snow scratches at the window glass. The chimney gives a brief hollow moan. Everyone glances upward. The man tending the fire listens for several seconds, then nods to himself. Draft's holding, he says. A good chimney draft pulls smoke upward and keeps the fire burning cleanly. When wind forces air down the pipe, smoke can spill into the room. In a tightly packed bunkhouse, that means coughing, watering eyes, and a sudden search for fresh air. This building is not especially tight, so fresh air is already finding you through cracks in the logs. Cold thread slips across your ankles. You look down and see a narrow gap near the floor where the chinking has fallen away. Snow dust pushes inward with each gust. The stove warms your front, the wall freezes your feet. The cabin offers balance. Men turn their boots, shift damp garments, and exchange quiet comments about the storm. Someone says the road will be buried by midnight. Another claims the barn roof needs clearing before dawn. A third predicts the wind will swing north and become worse. No one suggests it will improve. Weather knowledge matters here. Workers watch cloud colour, wind direction, animal behaviour, and the feel of the air. Some signs come from experience, others belong to folklore. One old woodsman says that when smoke sinks low among the trees, heavy snow will follow. Another says aching knees mean the same thing. The grey-moustached man rubs both knees. Could be snow, he says. Could be age. This is received as solid wisdom. Accounts from former lumber camps do not fully agree about who controlled the bunkhouse stove at night. Some describe an assigned fire tender who rose at intervals to add wood. Others suggest whoever woke cold first took responsibility. There is no clear consensus because practice varied by camp, crew size, and the temperament of the men nearest the stove. Here, the task appears to belong to a broad man called Pete. Pete sits in a chair beside the woodpile with the grave expression of a railway guard. He watches the fire, the drying clothes, and everyone who reaches for another log when a young worker tries to add one. Pete stops him. "Too much," he says. The young man argues that the room is cold. Pete points toward the upper bunks. "Ask them." A voice from above calls back that it is already too hot. Another voice complains that his blanket is smoking. The room erupts in brief laughter. Pete removes the extra log. Heat rises, which means the men in upper bunks can become uncomfortably warm while those near the floor remain cold. The stove creates several climates inside one room. A man sleeping high near the chimney may sweat. Another near the door may wake with ice in his water cup. You glance toward your lower bunk, halfway between stove and entrance, cold enough for honesty, warm enough for survival. You're beginning to appreciate its location. A sudden hiss draws everyone's attention. One of the hanging mittens has slipped from its peg and landed against the stovepipe. Its owner lunges forward, snatches it away, and pats the singed wool. The mitten survives with a brown mark and a powerful smell. Adds character. Neil says from the bench. The owner glares at him. No fight begins, which suggests either discipline or exhaustion. You stretch your hands toward the stove one final time. The skin across your knuckles has dried and tightened. Your coat still hangs near the entrance, damp but no longer frozen stiff. Supper waits outside, along with the narrow path and the blowing snow. The bell rings again. This time, no one delays. Men pull on coats, claim hats, and snatch mittens from pegs. The room fills with motion. Pete closes the stove door, checks the latch, and warns the last man out not to leave the bunkhouse open. You retrieve your coat. It is warm on the inside and wet at the shoulders. A small improvement. The door opens and winter rushes into the room. Snow spins across the floor. The stove flame flickers. You step into the storm with the others, carrying the heat in your clothes for perhaps 10 precious seconds as the cookhouse lamps glow through the white darkness ahead. The cookhouse lamps shimmer through the blowing snow, appearing and disappearing as the wind sweeps across the clearing. You follow the line of men with one hand raised against your face. The path between buildings has already begun to fill again. Boots break through the loose surface and find the packed layer below. Every step produces a soft crunch, then a scrape. The cookhouse door stands open just long enough for each man to enter. Warm light spills onto the snow. Inside, the air is brighter and sharper than in the bunkhouse. Kerosene lamps hang from hooks along the walls. Their flames tremble whenever the door opens. Long wooden tables run through the centre of the room, with benches on either side at the far end, beyond a serving counter. The kitchen glows with stove heat. You smell beans, bread, onions, coffee, hot fat and salt pork, and your hunger arrives all at once. It has been hiding beneath the cold and fatigue, waiting for a more convenient moment to become demanding. Men remove their hats and crowd toward the benches. There is little confusion because everyone seems to know where he belongs. Sawyers sit together. Teamsters gather near one end. Road crews occupy another table. Senior workers choose places close to the serving dishes. You pause, uncertain. A young man waves you toward an open section of bench. "Sit before they start," he says. You slide into place. The table is made from thick planks scrubbed pale by years of use. Knife marks cross its surface. Tin plates, cups, and spoons wait at each place. There are no tablecloths, decorative flowers, or small candles designed to create atmosphere. The atmosphere is hunger. A large bowl of beans lands in front of you, followed by matatas of salt pork, boiled potatoes, thick slices of bread, stewed dried fruit, and a deep dish of something resembling gravy. The cook appears behind the counter. He is a solid man with rolled sleeves, a white apron, and forearms marked by old burns. His face is red from heat. A towel hangs over one shoulder. He watches the room with the authority of a person who controls both food and coffee. Conversations soften. The cook says nothing. He does not need to. Camp cooks hold an unusual position in the social order. They may not command the logging crews, but they control meals, supplies, and the daily rhythm of the camp. A skilled cook helps keep workers healthy and willing to stay. A bad one can empty a camp faster than poor wages. Your cook looks capable of emptying the room for entirely different reasons. A worker near you whispers, "Don't complain." You whisper back that you had not planned to. "Good," he says. "Keep planning." The meal begins without ceremony. Serving dishes move quickly from hand to hand. Men take large portions but do not linger over their choices. You spoon beans onto your plate, add 2 potatoes, then reach for the pork. The platter is already moving away. You catch it at the edge. The man opposite you watches carefully. There is a rhythm to the table, and you are 1 beat behind. You learn fast. Bread arrives from the left, coffee comes from the right. Potatoes move in one direction, gravy in the other. Reaching across another man is discouraged. Holding a dish too long is treated as an act of selfishness in many logging camps. Meals are eaten quickly and with little conversation. The workday is organized around daylight, and large crews must be fed efficiently. Some camps enforce silence at the table, while others tolerate quiet talk as long as no one delays the passing dishes. This camp permits conversation, but only in brief pieces between mouthfuls. You cut into the salt pork. It is salty enough to preserve itself through several additional centuries. You take a bite of bread immediately. The bread is excellent, thick, warm, and slightly sweet. It absorbs the grease and softens the punishment. You add beans, then potatoes, then gravy. Your plate becomes a practical structure designed to support continued survival. The coffee is poured from a large metal pot. It arrives black and strong, with a faint smoky flavour. No one asks whether you prefer cream, sugar, oat milk, or emotional encouragement. You drink it as served. Across from you, a logger named Thomas eats with astonishing speed. His spoon moves from plate to mouth in steady, efficient strokes. He has already finished 1 helping before you manage half of yours. You ask whether he always eats so quickly. He glances toward the serving bowls. "Slow man gets hungry," he says. A 2nd helping of potatoes passes him. He proves his point. Food in a winter timber camp must supply enormous energy. Logging involves hours of lifting, chopping, sawing, climbing, hauling, and walking through snow. Daily meals are often heavy in fat, starch, meat, beans, bread, and sugar because men burn thousands of calories in severe cold. Modern nutrition advice might raise an eyebrow at the salt pork. Modern nutrition advice is not dragging logs at 20 degrees below freezing. A dish of dried apples reaches you. The fruit has been stewed until soft and sweet. It tastes bright after the salt and grease, almost luxurious. You take a generous spoonful. The cook notices. You cannot tell whether this is permitted. He turns away. Apparently, you remain safe. One uncommon custom remembered from certain camps is the use of pie as a measure of a cook's quality. Men judge not only the crust and filling, but how often pie appears. A camp serving pie at breakfast may gain a reputation across an entire timber district. Tonight, a row of pies rests on the kitchen shelf. Every eye has noticed them. No one mentions them. The pies have become a silent promise. The cook's assistant, a thin teenager called the Cookie, moves between tables carrying fresh bread and collecting empty dishes. He works quickly, balancing plates along one arm. His apron is too large and his expression suggests that sleep is a distant memory. Cookies often rise before the crews, haul water, split kindling, wash dishes, peel vegetables, and prepare ingredients. Their position is low, their hours long, and their mistakes highly visible. The boy drops a spoon. The room goes quiet for half a second. He picks it up. Life continues. You finish the first plate and discover that you are still hungry. This surprises you. You accept more beans, another slice of pork, and a thick piece of bread. Your body seems determined to replace every bit of warmth lost on the road. At the far table, a man reaches for the sugar bowl before it has completed its route. The cook speaks for the first time. "Let it pass. The man releases the bowl. No argument follows. The rule is simple. Dishes travel in order. Every worker gets a fair chance. Chaos wastes food and time. Former woodsmen left conflicting memories of camp dining etiquette. Some described rigid silence and strict seating, while others recalled noisy meals filled with jokes and arguments. Researchers remain divided over how much these differences came from region, company policy, or the personality of individual cooks. Here, the answer seems obvious. The cook's personality is policy. The pies finally arrive. Apple, each slice is wide with a browned crust and thick filling. Yours lands on the tin plate with a soft weight. Steam rises from the centre. You taste it. The apples are sweet, tart, and touched with cinnamon. The crust is rich with lard, after the cold trail, wet boots, smoky stove, and straw mattress. The pie feels almost unreasonable. You slow down. This is a mistake. Thomas finishes his slice and looks toward yours. You resume eating. Around you, the room begins to relax. Plates empty. Coffee cups are refilled. Shoulders lower. Men exchange short comments about the storm, tomorrow's work, and a broken sled runner near the North Road. The foreman sits at a smaller table with two senior men. They speak quietly while studying a folded map. Even during supper, the forest remains part of the conversation. Snow strikes the windows in dry bursts. The cookhouse roof creaks. One lamp flickers low, then steadies. For a few minutes, you are warm, full, and surrounded by the soft clatter of spoons against tin. The storm feels farther away than it truly is. Then the cook claps his hands once. Benches scrape backward. The meal is over. Men rise, collect their hats, and move toward the door. No one remains to digest peacefully. The cookie begins clearing tables at once. You stand more slowly than the others. Your stomach is comfortably heavy. Your face is warm from coffee. The thought of returning through the snow seems deeply unreasonable. Still, the line moves. You pull on your hat, step toward the door, and glance back at the cook. He's already inspecting the remaining bread. For a brief moment, he catches your eye. You nod toward the empty pie plates. The cook gives the smallest possible nod in return. High praise. The door opens, the wind enters, and the men disappear once more into the white night, carrying full stomachs back toward the waiting bunkhouse. You follow the others back across the clearing, where the storm has softened every hard edge. The cookhouse fades behind you almost at once. Snow swirls through the lantern light, thick enough to hide men only a few steps ahead. Their dark coats appear, vanish, then return as the wind shifts. You keep your eyes on the moving line of shoulders and trust that everyone is heading toward the same door. Your full stomach makes the walk easier. The apple pie has become a small furnace beneath your ribs. At the bunkhouse steps, men stamp their boots and crowd through the entrance. Warmth rolls over you again, carrying the familiar smells of smoke, damp clothing, pine tar, and humanity in close quarters. The air is heavier than before supper. Wet coats have been steaming near the stove, and the windows are now completely clouded. Pete checks the fire. Nils climbs to his upper bunk. Thomas, still apparently hungry, produces a piece of bread from his pocket and eats it before removing his coat. You decide not to question his methods. The evening settles into its next shape. Some men return to mending clothes. Others sharpen knives, repair suspenders, or examine boot soles by lamplight. A pair of workers begins a quiet card game on an overturned crate. Coins do not appear. Instead, they wager buttons, matches, and the privilege of avoiding some unpleasant chore tomorrow. You sit near your bunk and loosen your collar. The room hums with small sounds. A whetstone whispers against steel. Cards slap softly onto wood. Someone clears his throat. The stove clicks as iron expands and contracts. Then the red-bearded man takes a place on the long bench. His tin cup is empty now. He rests both hands on his knees and looks toward the younger men near the stove. You hear about the drive on the St. Croix, he asks. Several heads turn, someone groans, someone else says not again. This response does not discourage him. Camp stories rarely begin because an audience requests them. They begin because a storyteller has reached the point in the evening when silence seems wasteful. The red-bearded man describes a spring river drive from years earlier, when logs jammed across a narrow bend and piled higher than a church roof. According to him, one foreman crossed the rolling timber in polished boots, carrying a pipe that never went out, while every other man prepared to meet his maker. The details grow with each sentence. The pile becomes higher, the river becomes faster, the foreman's boots become more polished. You suspect the story has improved through long use. River drives are genuine and dangerous parts of the timber trade, in regions where waterways connect logging areas to sawmills. Crews send cut logs downstream after the spring thaw. Men balance on moving timber and break apart jams with poles and tools, often working in icy, fast water. The polished boots are less certain. Nils leans down from above you. He says it was St. Croix last time. Before that, Wisconsin River. You ask whether any part is true. Nils considers the matter. Probably had a river. The room breaks into laughter when the storyteller reaches the part where the foreman steps onto a spinning log and calmly asks for a match. He waits for the laughter to fade. Then he adds that the man later becomes a dentist in Duluth. No explanation follows. Another voice rises from the upper tier. A French-Canadian worker begins a song in a low, smooth tone. The melody is slow and repetitive, shaped for many voices rather than one. Two men join him on the second verse. You do not understand every word, but the rhythm suggests travel, distance, and someone waiting far from the woods. The room quiets. Even the card players pause. Songs move easily through logging camps because workers bring them from farms, ports, villages, and older timber regions. French-Canadian voyageurs and lumbermen preserve long traditions of call and response singing, while Irish, Scandinavian, British, and American workers contribute ballads, comic verses, hymns, and work songs. Lyrics change as they travel. A town name becomes another town. A river moves across a border. An unfortunate farmer becomes an unfortunate logger. The song ends without applause. It simply fades. And the room remains still for a breath or two. Then someone asks for the jam on Jerry's rock. A few men object that it is unlucky. This begins a discussion. Songs about death, storms, lost crews, and failed river drives can feel too close to real dangers. Some workers avoid certain verses before a difficult day. Others sing them precisely because naming danger makes it easier to face. Pete places another log in the stove. "Sing something with supper in it," he says. A younger man responds with a ridiculous verse about a cook who bakes a boot into a pie and serves it to a visiting company owner. The cook in the song is chased through 3 counties by hungry men carrying forks. You hope your actual cook never hears it. The verse continues, gaining new lines from every corner of the room. Someone rhymes gravy with navy. Another forces potato into a sentence where it does not belong. By the end. The fictional cook has married a governor's daughter and opened a hotel for horses. This is accepted as a satisfying conclusion. A curious fragment of camp folklore claims that a man should never whistle while lying in his bunk because it invites wind through the roof. The belief may come from sailors, miners, or simple irritation with people who whistle after lights out. When one worker tests the superstition, 3 socks are thrown at him. The wind outside strengthens almost immediately. He sits up, no one says anything. He does not whistle again. Stories turn toward animals. A teamster describes a moose that follows a supply sleigh for 6 miles. A sawyer claims a black bear once opens a cookhouse door with its paw, enters politely, and eats only preserves. Nils tells you about a camp dog that recognizes the dinner bell but ignores every work signal. That story, at least, seems entirely believable. The tawny-eared dog from outside has now entered the bunkhouse and lies beneath the bench. At each mention of an intelligent animal, it raises its head slightly, as if expecting recognition. The conversation shifts again. Men speak of distant homes. One remembers a farm in Michigan where snow lies smooth across open fields instead of twisting between trees. Another describes a crowded street in Montreal, bright with shop windows and sleigh bells. Emil talks about a village in Finland where winter darkness lasts so long that people measure the season by church days and stored food. These memories are quieter than the tall tales. They do not require laughter. You listen as voices reveal pieces of lives that are invisible during work. A man who spends daylight driving horses remembers playing the violin at weddings. A broad sawyer once studies for the ministry. The grey-moustached worker near the stove has 3 daughters and carries their photograph inside his shirt. He shows it only when asked twice. The image is small and faded. 3 girls stand stiffly beside a chair, wearing pale dresses and serious expressions. They move when picture taken, Thomas asks. No. The father says. Photographer told them not to breathe. Thomas nods as if this explains everything. It's tempting to imagine the bunkhouse as a rough brotherhood where hardship erases differences. Old memoirs sometimes encourage that picture. Yet other evidence points to ethnic divisions, bullying, unequal pay, and sharp hierarchies among jobs. There is still disagreement over whether camp storytelling truly united mixed crews or merely offered temporary relief from tensions that returned with daylight. Tonight, at least. The stories cross the room more freely than the men do. A card player begins telling a tale about Paul Bunyan. The name brings smiles. By the early 20th century, stories of gigantic lumbermen already circulate in several timber regions, though the familiar national legend develops more fully through later publications and advertising. In this version, Paul uses a pine tree as a toothpick and digs a river by dragging his axe behind him. Someone interrupts, no, that was his cook. Another insists, it was the blue ox. The storyteller sighs. Surrounded by experts, you lean back against the bunk frame. The straw mattress presses through your shirt. Lamplight moves across the rafters, revealing smoke-darkened beams and initials cut into the wood. Above them, the storm rubs against the roof with a long, steady hush. The stories continue. A ghost lantern appears beside an abandoned haul road. A dead foreman returns to count horses. A logger finds his own footprints leading toward him in fresh snow. That last one brings a pause. You glance toward the frosted window. Nothing is visible beyond it. Nils assures you that the footprint story happens in Maine, which apparently makes it less concerning. The lamps burn lower. Voices soften. One by one, men withdraw from the circle and begin preparing their bunks. The tales do not truly end. They dissolve into fragments, private jokes, half-finished songs, and names repeated with affection or disbelief. You pull your blanket loose and sit at the edge of your narrow bed. The room feels different now, still crowded, still smoky, still filled with men who might steal your peg space without remorse. But their voices have given the walls depth. The cabin holds rivers, farms, villages, daughters, impossible animals, disastrous cooks, and forests larger than any map. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, someone begins one final song so quietly that it feels less like performance than memory. The final song fades before anyone decides where it truly ends. For a few seconds, only the stove speaks. Resin snaps inside the firebox. The stovepipe gives a soft metallic tick. Wind presses snow against the walls with the patient sound of sand sliding over paper. Then the bunkhouse begins preparing itself for darkness. The card players gather their matches and buttons. One man counts his winnings twice, though they amount to 3 buttons, a bent nail, and permission to avoid carrying wash water in the morning. His opponent claims the nail was never part of the wager. They argue quietly, neither appears willing to wake the foreman over it. Near the stove, Emil lifts the newspaper from his boots and tests the felt liners with his thumb. They remain damp, so he replaces the paper with fresh sheets. A political speech disappears into the left boot. A report about railway expansion goes into the right. Tomorrow, both stories will be wetter and less important. You sit on the edge of your bunk and watch the room transform. During the evening, clothing has been scattered wherever warmth can reach it. Now every piece must return to its owner. Men claim socks from wires, mittens from pegs, scarves from bed rails, and trousers from improvised lines near the chimney. Mistakes are common. A worker holds up a long wool sock and asks who owns it. 4 men say it belongs to them. He examines the heel, sniffs it once, and hands it to Niels. You decide there are traditions you do not need explained. Your own socks are dry enough to wear in the morning, though one feels slightly stiffer than the other. You fold them together and place them beneath the blanket at the foot of your bunk. The warmth of your body will keep them from freezing overnight. Your coat goes on the shared peg. You leave enough room for Nils's towel, respecting the border negotiated earlier. His towel still occupies more than half the peg, but international peace often requires compromise. Boots demand greater care. You carry yours from the drying plank and inspect the leather. The toes are damp but flexible. You loosen the laces and pull the tongues forward so air can circulate. Then you set the boots beneath your bunk, where you can reach them without standing barefoot on the cold floor. The red-bearded man notices. "Turn them over," he says. "Mice." You look beneath the bunk. Nothing moves. He smiles. You cannot tell whether this is advice or entertainment. Small animals do enter remote cabins, especially when food scraps. Warmth and nesting material are available. A mouse may chew leather, wool, paper, or anything carrying salt from human sweat. Some men hang their boots from pegs. Others place them upside down or stuff the openings with cloth. You turn yours upside down. There is no dignity in discovering a mouse in your boot before sunrise. The long bench near the stove slowly empties. Pete remains in his chair, studying the fire. He uses the poker to break apart a glowing section of log, then adds 2 pieces of hardwood instead of fast-burning pine. The new wood catches slowly. It will hold heat longer through the first part of the night. Night fires require judgment. Too little wood and the room cools quickly. Too much and the upper bunks become unbearable. A roaring stove can also throw sparks, overheat the pipe, or ignite nearby clothing. The cabin is built of timber. Everyone understands the arrangement. You take your small washcloth and join the line near the basins. Evening washing is brief. Water must be carried, heated, and shared, so no one performs a leisurely routine involving scented oils and several towels. One man splashes his face, another washes his hands and neck, third dips only 2 fingers into the water, touches them to his forehead, and declares himself improved. You wait your turn. The water in the basin has become grey. You use it anyway, wiping smoke and dried sweat from your face. The cloth feels rough against windburned skin when you finish. The cold air near the wall tightens your cheeks. Some logging camps employ a camp chore man responsible for water, wood, cleaning, and general maintenance. Elsewhere, such duties rotate among workers or fall to younger labourers. Period accounts confirm that bathing facilities are usually limited, especially in deep winter, although standards differ greatly from one operation to another. A full wash may occur weekly. It may also occur when weather, time, and personal enthusiasm happen to meet. Beside the basin hangs a small mirror with a crack through the centre. You look into it. The glass divides your face into 2 tired strangers. Your hair is flattened by the cap. Your cheeks are red. A pale mark has appeared on your forehead where the bunk frame introduced itself. You look experienced now, provided no one asks what experience caused the bruise. The lamps are turned down one at a time. A man reaches beneath each glass chimney and lowers the wick. Yellow flames shrink. Shadows climb the walls. The upper bunks disappear first, becoming dark shelves beneath the rafters. Only 2 lamps remain bright. They're like catches on metal buttons, tin cups, and the polished edge of a saw file placed safely inside a wooden box. The room becomes quieter without anyone requesting silence. Conversations narrow to whispers. Men finish small chores with practiced hands. A torn suspender is tied off. A pocket knife folds shut. Letters return to envelopes and hidden beneath pillows. The grey-moustached father looks once more at the photograph of his daughters. He slips it inside his shirt before removing his outer clothes, keeping it close even in sleep. You turn toward your bunk. The straw mattress has not improved during supper. You lift the pillow and redistribute its contents, pushing straw toward the thinner corners. After several attempts, it becomes nearly rectangular, an achievement. You remove your shirt and trousers but keep your long wool underclothes on. Most men sleep partly dressed in winter camps. The cabin may be hot when they lie down and bitterly cold before dawn. Clothing also allows a faster response if fire, weather, or frightened horses create trouble during the night. You place your folded trousers beneath the pillow. This keeps them close and prevents anyone from stepping on them. It may also soften the straw, though only slightly. A strange habit reported in some bunkhouses is the placing of a spoon, coin, or small piece of iron beneath a pillow to prevent cramps or nightmares. The explanation changes depending on who tells the story. Iron may repel harmful spirits. A cold spoon may wake a restless sleeper. A coin may simply be harder for another man to borrow, else leans over from above. You talk in that to sleep, he asks. You say you do not think so. Everyone who talks says that. He withdraws. You wonder what he does in his sleep around the room. Blankets are shaken out and tucked beneath bodies. Bed frames complain under shifting weight. Straw rustles in dozens of mattresses, creating a dry, continuous murmur like wind moving through dead grass. One man kneels briefly beside his bunk to pray. Another reads a small Bible near the last lamp. A third hides beneath his blanket before removing his trousers, preserving a modesty that seems remarkable after an evening spent sharing socks and watch water. Researchers have never fully agreed on how intimate bunkhouse life affected relationships among the workers. Some interpret the shared sleeping room as a place where trust and solidarity developed. Others emphasize the strain of constant observation, limited privacy, ethnic divisions, and enforced closeness. Both possibilities seem present as you listen to men settle only inches from one another while guarding tiny personal boundaries. The torn-eared dog circles 3 times beneath the bench. It lies down with a sigh. Pete stands from his chair and makes a final circuit of the room. He moves wet garments farther from the pipe, checks the stove latch, and closes the metal draft part way. Then he selects several pieces of firewood and stacks them within easy reach. His duty is not finished. It has merely become quieter. The second lamp goes out. One remains near the stove. The flame is low, turning the room amber and black. Faces vanish beneath blankets. The rafters become a dark ceiling of smoke and shadow. You slide into your bunk. Straw crackles beneath your shoulders. The blanket is heavy but scratchy. You pull it to your chin and immediately feel cold air slip beneath one side. You tuck the edge under your body. Better. Above you. Neil shifts. Dust falls lightly onto your face. You close your eyes, open them, wipe your cheek, and close them again. The room is full of breathing now. Some breaths are deep, some whistle through noses. One man gives a sudden snort, then becomes quiet. The last lamp shrinks. Pete lowers the wick until only a small blue-edged flame remains. Outside, the storm moves over the cabin roof. Inside, more than 30 tired bodies lie in narrow wooden bunks, waiting for sleep to find them in the smoky dark. Darkness settles unevenly across the bunkhouse. The final lamp near the stove remains low, barely strong enough to outline the nearest bed frames. Beyond that weak circle, the room becomes a collection of sounds. Straw shifts, blankets drag against rough wood. Someone coughs into a sleeve. Another man whispers a final sentence that receives no answer. You lie still and listen, Sleep does not arrive immediately. Your body is tired, but the bunk is unfamiliar. The mattress dips beneath your hips and rises beneath your shoulders. One sharp piece of straw presses near your ribs. Each time you move away from it, another piece seems to take its place, above you. Nils turns over. The wooden slats groan. A fine sprinkling of dust reaches your blanket. You begin to understand that sleeping here requires more than closing your eyes. It requires learning the laws of the room. The first law concerns noise. A bunkhouse full of exhausted workers can tolerate snoring, coughing, muttering, and the occasional unfortunate digestive announcement. These are natural sounds, and therefore mostly forgiven. Deliberate noise is another matter. No singing after lamps are lowered. No sharpening tools, no boot repairs, no unnecessary conversation, and certainly no whistling, whether because it invites wind or because 30 tired men may throw objects at your head. Someone near the door whispers a joke. A voice from the darkness says, "Morning." The whispering stops, the meaning is clear, save it for morning, or discover how quickly a rolled sock can travel across a dark room. You adjust your pillow. The straw inside gives a dry crunch that sounds much louder than it should. No one objects. Bedding noise is permitted, within reason. Building an entire mattress after lights out would not be. The second law concerns blankets. Your blanket belongs to the company, but while it covers you, it is treated as your territory. No one may pull it, borrow it, step on it, or use the corner to wipe a wet hand. A man may own almost nothing in camp, yet he will defend his sleeping cover with remarkable seriousness. You tuck the wool beneath your shoulder. Its coarse fibres scratch your neck. Across the aisle, someone complains softly, "My blanket's gone." A second voice answers, "You're lying on it." There is a pause. "So I am." The matter ends. Blankets in winter camps are often heavy wool because wool retains heat even when damp and resists sparks better than many lighter fabrics. Companies may issue 1 or 2 per worker, depending on the climate and the generosity of management. Men sometimes bring personal quilts from home, though such items risk damage. Theft, or permanent absorption of bunkhouse smoke. You would recognize this blanket by smell alone. The third law governs boots. Never place them where another man must step. Never borrow them without permission. Never dry them so close to the stove that the leather cracks. And never kick snow from them onto someone's bedding. That final offence appears capable of starting a serious dispute. Near the entrance, a late arrival fumbles through the darkness. His boots scrape across the floor. He knocks against a bed frame. "Watch it." Someone mutters. The late man whispers an apology and begins removing his coat. Then a boot lands with a thump. A sleeper sits up. You throw that, dropped it. Drop the next one softer. The late man lowers the second boot as carefully as a priest placing a sacred object on an altar. Peace returns. Your own boots wait upside down beneath you. You reach one hand over the edge and touch the heel, confirming that no mouse has carried them away in the last 10 minutes. The movement attracts Nils' attention. "What you doing checking my boots? For what? Mice." Nils gives a quiet laugh. "Redbeard told you that." You say nothing. He tells everyone. You withdraw your hand. The red-bearded man has successfully entertained himself from across the room without making a sound. The fourth law concerns the stove. Only Pete, or someone Pete trusts, adjusts the fire during the first part of the night. A man who wakes cold may add wood later, but he must do it carefully. He must not wake the room, overheat the upper bunks, leave the door unlatched, or scatter sparks. In a wooden cabin filled with wool, straw, dry clothing, and sleeping men. Fire discipline is not merely politeness, it is survival. Camp buildings burn quickly when neglected. Newspapers from timber regions occasionally report bunkhouses, barns, and cookhouses lost to stove sparks or overheated chimneys. Remote locations make firefighting difficult, especially when water is frozen and wind drives flame through dry timber. You look toward the dull red seam of the stove. It seems less like a friendly household object now, more like a large animal that everyone has agreed to feed carefully. The fifth law is about water. The drinking bucket remains covered. No washing cloth enters it. No cup is dipped after touching dirty hands. The wash basin is separate, even when both containers look nearly identical in darkness. This distinction has saved more than one camp from illness. By the early 20th century, understanding of germs is spreading, but sanitation in remote labour camps remains inconsistent. Some companies improve water handling and waste disposal because sickness reduces productivity. Others continue older habits until outbreaks force change. Here, the carved X on one bucket serves as public health policy, simple, but effective if everyone remembers what the X means. You hear liquid pour near the stove. Someone drinks from a tin cup, swallows and replaces the lid. No splash follows. Good. The sixth law governs personal belongings. A pipe, knife, letter, photograph, or coin may be left near a bunk, but touching it without permission is dangerous. Men lend tools and tobacco, yet borrowing requires acknowledgement. An object taken silently becomes theft, even if returned later. Camp justice is often informal. A thief may be mocked, shunned, dismissed, or physically encouraged to leave. Company rules exist, but reputation carries great weight where men live and work together for months. An odd punishment described in a few woodsmen's recollections involves sewing a suspected thief's trouser legs shut while he sleeps. The victim wakes late, struggles to dress, and discovers that the entire bunkhouse has developed a sudden interest in his morning difficulties. Whether this happened often is doubtful. Whether it happened at least once seems entirely plausible. You imagine waking to find your clothing carefully altered. You move your folded trousers farther beneath the pillow. The seventh law concerns hygiene. This word sounds grand for a room where several dozen men share 2 basins and dry socks above a stove. But standards exist. No spitting near the bunks. No wet clothes on another man's bed. No food scraps beneath the mattress. No using someone else's towel, comb, or razor. And anyone who discovers lice is expected to speak before the problem becomes a democratic institution. A man near the wall scratches vigorously. The scratching stops when someone clears his throat. Perhaps coincidence. Perhaps enforcement. Different sources paint very different pictures of bunkhouse cleanliness. Company reports often emphasize orderly quarters and regular inspections, while personal memoirs sometimes describe vermin, stale air, and bedding that moves by itself. There is no settled answer about which picture was more typical, because conditions varied widely, and both employers and former workers had reasons to exaggerate. Your own evidence remains mixed. The floor is swept, the air is smoky. The bedding is questionable. The rules, however, are clear. The final law is the most important. Do not disturb another man's sleep without cause. A worker rises before dawn and spends the day near falling trees, heavy sleds, sharp tools, and powerful horses. Fatigue can turn a small mistake into a fatal one. Rest is not treated as comfort alone, it is part of the next day's safety. This explains why the room becomes protective of silence. It also explains why no one wakes the snorer near the far wall, even though he produces a sound like a saw cutting through wet timber. The noise rises, falls, stops, then begins again with greater confidence. You wait for someone to object. No one does. Snoring, apparently, belongs to nature. Niels leans over the edge of his bunk. New man, you open your eyes if you get up. Don't grab my ladder. You look toward the short wooden steps beside the bunks, why loose. He disappears before explaining further. You study the darkness where the ladder stands. Another useful fact delivered at the least useful time. The stove ticks, wind brushes the wall. A branch scrapes across the roof with a long, dry sound. You settle deeper beneath the blanket and begin to feel the room's rhythm. The laws are unwritten. but they hold everyone together. They protect warmth, possessions, dignity, and precious sleep. You turn carefully onto your side. The straw finally stops resisting. Your breathing slows. Then, from somewhere near the door, a man begins to whistle in his sleep. 3 voices speak at once. Stop! He wakes with a startled grunt. The room becomes quiet again, and this time sleep begins to draw closer. Sleep approaches, then retreats. You hover at its edge while the storm tests the cabin. At first, the wind arrives in long, low breaths. It moves through the treetops beyond the walls, gathering strength as it crosses the clearing. Then it strikes the bunkhouse broadside. The logs give a dull shudder. Your bed frame trembles against the wall. A few men wake enough to grunt, shift their blankets, and settle again. You remain still. The darkness makes every sound larger. Snow scrapes across the roof in dry waves. Loose flakes hiss against the window glass. Somewhere near the eaves, a board taps twice, pauses, then taps again. You try to decide whether the sound was there before. Probably. That is what you tell yourself. The stove glows faintly near the centre of the room, showing only a line around its door. Pete sleeps in the chair beside it with his cap tipped over his face. One hand rests near the poker. The next gust arrives harder. It rushes around the corners of the cabin and finds every narrow opening between the logs. Cold air slips through cracked chinking. A thin current touches your cheek. Though your bunk is several feet from the wall, the draft carries the clean scent of snow and pine. It also carries small grains of ice. One lands near your eye. You pull the blanket higher. A strong timber bunkhouse can endure severe winter weather, but most camps are built quickly from local materials. Builders choose sturdy logs, steep roofs, and sheltered ground when possible. Thick walls store heat, while the angled roof helps prevent snow from accumulating until its weight threatens the structure. The roof above you is steep. This is comforting. The amount of snow sitting on it is less comforting. A heavy load shifts with a soft, sliding murmur. Several men open their eyes. The sound grows. Snow moves down one side of the roof, then drops from the eaves with a deep, muffled collapse. The ground beside the cabin seems to absorb the impact. Nils speaks from above. Only snow. You had reached the same conclusion, though perhaps less confidently. The storm answers with another blow. This gust presses against the building for several seconds instead of striking and passing. The walls creak. The stovepipe vibrates inside its ceiling collar. A metal cup hanging from a nail taps against the wood. Tap, tap, tap. Man near the stove rises, removes the cup, and places it on the floor. No one thanks him. The silence that follows is thanks enough. Your eyes adjust to the dimness. You can make out the black lines of the bunks and the pale shape of the nearest window. Frost covers the glass from edge to edge. Each burst of wind sends a faint powder through a gap in the frame. The man sleeping below the window has wrapped a scarf around his head. Only his nose remains visible. You consider doing the same, but your scarf is hanging near the door. Several yards away, across a room filled with boots, benches, sleeping bodies, and the loose ladder Nils warned you about. You decide your face can manage. The wall behind your bunk gives a sudden pop. You sit up too quickly and stop just before striking your forehead again. A wiser man now, Nils leans down, log settling. You whisper that the building seems to settle often. It's old, he says. Then, after a pause, or storm is strong, this does not improve matters. Wooden structures continue to move after construction. Logs shrink, swell, twist, and compress as moisture and temperature change. In extreme cold, timber can crack with startling force. The sound resembles a pistol shot or a branch breaking close by. Another pop comes from the far wall. This time, no one moves. You slowly lie back. The Storm finds a loose shutter or board near the rear corner. It begins flapping against the outer wall. At first, the rhythm is irregular. Then it becomes steady. Knock, pause. Knock, pause. The sleeper nearest that corner pulls his blanket over his head. The knocking continues. Someone whispers, "Leave it." Another voice answers, "You leave it. No one volunteers to step outside." The Storm is producing a small piece of music and everyone hates it. Finally, a broad man named Amos swings his feet to the floor. He mutters while pulling on boots without socks. Pete wakes and raises his cap. "We're back wall." Pete looks toward the roof, listens to the wind, and shakes his head. Not outside. Amos stands with one boot half-laced. "It'll keep on. Let it." Pete's tone closes the discussion. A loose board is annoying. A man lost 10 feet from the door in whiteout conditions is worse. Amos removes the boots and returns to bed. The knocking continues over time. Your mind begins fitting meaning into it. A fist against wood, a branch, a tool swinging from a hook, a person outside. You know there is no person outside. Still, the thought arrives. A curious belief in some timber districts holds that 3 knocks on a bunkhouse wall warn of an accident to come. The number varies in different retellings, as superstitions often do when they travel from mining camps, ships, farms, and forests. The board knocks twice, then 5 times. You decide the spirit world has poor counting skills. Wind pours across the chimney top. Smoke puffs briefly from the stove seams. Pete is awake at once. He stands, checks the draft, and cracks the stove door. A thin line of orange appears. Smoke rises into the room, sharp and bitter, making several men cough. Pete waits. The chimney groans, then the draft catches again, pulling the smoke upward. He closes the door and remains beside the stove, listening. Chimney performance can change rapidly during high winds. Air pressure around the roof may interfere with the upward pull of smoke, especially if the pipe is short, partially blocked, or poorly placed. Camp builders learn through experience, but storms have their own opinions about engineering. You smell soot on the air, the warmth in the room seems thinner now. Cold gathers along the floor and clings the bed frame. Your blanket still holds heat around your chest. Yet your feet feel the draft pressing through the lower logs. You flex your toes. Still warm enough. Across the aisle, a sleeper begins reciting numbers. 14, 15, 16. A nearby man tells him to stop. The counting continues. 17, 18. Someone throws a mitten. The count awakes and asks why people are attacking him. No one explains. The room settles again, but the cabin does not. A deep groan travels through the roof timbers. It begins above the stove and moves toward the far wall, as though some enormous weight is slowly turning overhead. This time, Pete takes the lamp. He raises the wick and studies the rafters. The yellow light reveals dark beams, smoke stains, and a scattering of frost where warm air meets the roof. Men lift their heads from pillows. Pete walks beneath the center beam, looking for sagging, fresh cracks, or falling dust. He sees nothing. The lamp makes the room feel safer simply because it allows everyone to inspect the danger. Conflicting interpretations remain over how vulnerable temporary logging buildings truly were during major storms. Company records often present camps as solid and well-maintained, while personal recollections describe roofs bending, walls leaking, and men waking to snow on their blankets. Memory tends to preserve extremes. So the ordinary truth is difficult to measure. Tonight, the roof holds. That is the truth that matters. Pete lowers the lamp. Darkness returns. The wind changes direction and now strikes the end of the cabin. The door rattles in its frame. Its wooden latch lifts slightly, then drops. Every man near it wakes. Pete crosses the room and places a short timber brace against the door. The next gust pushes, but the brace holds firm. The bunkhouse becomes a ship under strain. Its walls creak like ribs. The stovepipe moans. Bed frames shift as men adjust their weight. Outside is a world of motion. Snow races between trees. Branches bow. Drifts rise against the walls. The path to the cookhouse disappears completely. Inside, everything depends on friction, joinery, iron, fire, and habit. You listen long enough for fear to become familiarity. The noises no longer arrive as threats. They become parts of a pattern. Gust, creak, hiss. Pause, gust, creak, hiss, pause. The cabin bends slightly and holds. The roof complains and holds. The door rattles and holds. Your breathing begins to follow the spaces between the sounds. Nils turns over above you. Still alive, he murmurs. You tell him yes. Good, he says. Wake me if roof leaves. You almost laugh. The storm presses one more time against the wall, powerful and determined. But the rough logs remain in place. You close your eyes. Around you. The bunkhouse continues groaning into the night. Not like a building about to fail, but like an old worker forced to carry one more heavy load. The cabin holds, but comfort remains unevenly distributed. You lie beneath the coarse blanket while the storm continues its slow assault on the walls. The room feels warm around your face and chest, yet cold gathers near your feet. Heat from the stove rises toward the rafters, where the upper bunks trap it, down near the floor. Icy air creeps through cracks and settles like invisible water. Nils shifts above you, his mattress rustles a moment later. His face appears over the edge. Too hot, he whispers. You stare upward from beneath your blanket. Your toes are cold enough to disagree. Open your blanket, you suggest. Tss. Then dust falls in, and you decide this is justice. The bunkhouse has divided itself into climates. Pete and the men nearest the stove sleep in heavy warmth. Those near the door endure sudden gusts whenever the latch moves. The upper bunks hold smoke and heat, lower bunks collect drafts, damp boots, and whatever falls through the pebedabur. No engineer has designed this system. It has developed naturally. Like weather. You draw your knees toward your chest and tuck the blanket tighter around your feet. The wool traps some warmth, but each movement opens another small gap along your back. You turn onto your side, then onto your other side, trying to create a shape the blanket can understand across the aisle. A man kicks his covers away. A few minutes later, he wakes shivering and pulls them back. The process repeats. His sleeping body seems unable to negotiate with itself. At the far wall, the scarf-wrapped man beneath the window has added a cap over his face. He now resembles a bundle of laundry prepared for shipment. Only one hand extends from the blanket, resting on his chest. The frost on the window thickens. Warm moisture from breath and wet clothing condenses against the cold glass, then freezes. By morning, the pane may carry white patterns like fern leaves. Beautiful, certainly, though less charming when the beauty forms inside the room. The stove gives a soft metallic click. Its fire is settling. Pete opens one eye from his chair. He listens without moving. No one else appears concerned, but you have learned that every change in the stove has meaning. The snapping becomes less frequent. The red glow around the door fades. Warmth no longer presses as strongly against your face. Pete waits another minute. Then he rises. His boots remain beside the chair, but he does not put them on. He crosses the floor in thick socks, moving between bunks with the caution of a man who knows exactly where every obstacle waits. He opens the stove door. Orange light floods the lower half of the room. Several faces appear above blanket edges. Pete uses the poker to separate the coals. Sparks rise and vanish inside the firebox. He places one split log across the embers, then a second at an angle. The dry wood catches with a low rush. Pete closes the door and adjusts the draft. The flame brightens. Warmth begins rebuilding itself. Wood stoves became common in North American camps because they produce concentrated heat, burned available fuel, and required less masonry than a large fireplace. Their efficiency depended on steady tending, dry wood, and a chimney that behaved itself. Tonight, Pete performs the role of thermostat, furnace mechanic, and guardian of civilization. He returns to his chair. Someone from an upper bunk mutters, "Not too much." Pete ignores him. The room slowly warms near the floor. Your toes stop aching. A pleasant heaviness spreads into your legs. Then the man beside the stove begins to snore. His first breath is quiet. The second vibrates. The third arrives as a long, rolling growl that rises in pitch and ends with a wet click. A few sleepers stir. The snorer inhales sharply and produces another sound. This one like a dull saw meeting a knot. No one speaks. Snoring belongs to nature. You remember. Nature is becoming ambitious. Another man begins snoring from the opposite wall. His rhythm is faster and lighter. The two sounds overlap, creating a rough duet. Long rumble, short whistle, long rumble, short whistle. You try to follow the pattern. It almost becomes soothing until one stops abruptly and leaves you waiting for the next breath. It comes, you relax. Then the other man coughs and begins again from the beginning. Sleep in crowded labour camps is rarely silent. Men arrive physically exhausted, often with respiratory irritation from smoke, dust, tobacco, and cold air. Some breathe heavily from years of hard work. Others talk, grind their teeth, or move through vivid dreams. Tonight, the bunkhouse offers all available varieties. A sleeper near the rear wall mutters someone's name. Another answers with a word that makes no sense near the wakes. The man who counted earlier begins again, but this time he counts backward. 10, 9, 8. A voice beneath him says, "Stay asleep." The counting stops at 6. You close your eyes and try to let the noises blend into one soft background. Wind outside, snoring inside, fire beneath iron, straw beneath cloth. For several minutes, it works. Then Nils scratches. The sound comes from directly above your face. Scratch, pause, scratch. You open your eyes. Nils, no answer, scratch. You tap the underside of his bunk. The scratching stops. What, you're scratching? So you hesitate. The concern does not need to be named. Nils understands anyway. "Wool," he says, "not lice. This distinction is impossible to verify from below. A small method used by some woodsmen against suspected bed pests involves placing bunk legs in tins of kerosene or smearing the frame joints with grease. Others carry cedar shavings, believing the smell repels insects. The pests, unfortunately, are not known for respecting human confidence. You listen. Nils does not scratch again. Perhaps wool, perhaps diplomacy. The stove heat continues rising. Your face becomes too warm while your feet remain comfortable. You lower the blanket from your chin. Cold air touches your neck. Better. A man near the stove sits upright suddenly. Hoarse he shouts. Several sleepers wake. Pete lifts his cap. The man stares into darkness, breathing hard. "What horse?" someone asks. He looks around, confused. Then he lies down. No explanation follows. Dreams in camp often reflect the day's work. Men call to teams, warn of falling trees, pull imaginary saws, or shout instructions to absent partners. Exhaustion carries the forest into sleep. You begin to understand why bunks are placed close together. Not for companionship, perhaps, but so everyone can observe one another's private battles with imaginary timber. A foot appears from the upper bunk across the aisle. It hangs over the edge, pale inside a wool sock. The foot sways twice. Then it rests against the face of the sleeper below. He wakes instantly. There is a muffled curse, followed by a shove. The foot disappears. Its owner remains asleep. For much of the 20th century, romantic images of lumber camps emphasized cheerful fellowship and rugged endurance. Letters and memoirs reveal something messier: boredom, irritation, loneliness, humor, fatigue, and the daily work of tolerating people who cannot be escaped. Those who study camp life still differ on whether the closeness created lasting solidarity or merely taught men to endure one another until spring at this hour. Endurance seems the stronger force. A sleeper near the door rises to use the bucket kept for nighttime necessities. He moves quietly, guided by memory. The floor creaks beneath him. Cold air reaches your bunk as his blanket lifts from the mattress. He finishes, replaces the lid, and returns. No one comments. Practical needs are granted silence. You turn onto your back. The ceiling is barely visible. Smoke gathers high above, warmed by the stove and trapped beneath the roof. Nils shifts again, opening his blanket to release heat. A wave of warm, stale air descends through the slats. You pull your blanket over your nose. The bunkhouse has found yet another climate. Near the stove, Pete begins to doze. His chin lowers towards his chest. The fire crackles steadily now. The walls still creak, but less sharply. Snow packed against the outer logs may be insulating the lower cracks, softening some drafts even as it buries the building deeper. Your body slowly adjusts. The mattress remains lumpy, but the shape of it is becoming familiar. The cold at your feet no longer surprises you. The snoring develops a rhythm. Even Nils's occasional movement becomes part of the room's breathing. One man laughs in his sleep. It is a quiet, delighted laugh, completely out of place in the dark cabin. Someone whispers, "Good dream." The sleeper does not answer. You smile beneath the blanket. Perhaps he's dreaming of the pie, perhaps of home, perhaps of a camp where every bunk is soft, every boot is dry, and no one sleeps directly above him. The wind continues outside, but inside the restless sounds begin stretching farther apart. A cough, a sigh, a shifting bed frame, then longer silence. You let your muscles loosen, the heat near your face, the cold beneath your bunk, and the strange chorus of sleeping men finally balance into something almost gentle, not quiet, not comfortable, but steady enough to carry you deeper into the night. The balance does not last. Sometime after midnight, the stove gives a hollow cough. You wake without understanding why. The room is dark except for a faint red glow near the floor. For several seconds, you hear only wind moving over the roof and the slow breathing of sleeping men. Then smoke reaches you. It slides into your nose. Dry and bitter, you open your eyes for fully. Another cough comes from the stove, followed by a soft metallic rattle. The red seam around its door has almost disappeared. Pete remains folded in his chair, cap over his face, but his posture changes the instant someone near the wall begins coughing. Pete lifts his head. He sniffs once, then he stands. The floorboards are cold beneath his socks. You can tell by the way he moves. Quickly, but without stamping. He crosses to the stove and places one hand near its side, not on it, near it. The iron has cooled. Pete opens the firebox door, and a weak orange light reveals a bed of dull coals buried beneath ash. One of the logs added earlier has burned poorly. Its centre remains black, while the outer wood has collapsed into charcoal. A gust sweeps across the chimney. Smoke rolls outward. Pete shuts the door at once. Men begin waking around the room. What is it? Oh. Fire low. Pipe blocked. Go back to sleep. No one goes back to sleep. The air has changed. Smoke hangs closer to the bunks now, stinging your eyes and coating your tongue with soot. You sit upright, carefully avoiding the frame above, and pull the blanket around your shoulders. Nils leans over. Cold, he whispers. For once, the upper bunk offers no advantage. Pete raises the lamp wick. Yellow light spreads through the cabin. Faces emerge from blankets, pale and irritated. The men nearest the stove look warmer than the others, though not by much. Pete checks the draft lever. It is open. He taps the stovepipe with the poker. A soft shower of soot whispers down inside it. "Creosote," Amos asks. Pete shakes his head. "Wind." A strong downward gust can reverse a chimney's draft, forcing smoke back into the room. Snow or ice near the top may also interfere with airflow. In winter camps, a stove that refuses to draw is more than an annoyance without steady heat. Wet clothing stiffens, water freezes, and sleep becomes difficult long before the temperature reaches truly dangerous levels. P opens the door again, this time only a narrow crack. Smoke curls out to closes it. The red-bearded storyteller climbs from his bunk and pulls on trousers. Emil follows, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders like a cloak. Neither waits to be asked. "What do you need?" Emil says. "Dry kindling." Pete points toward the wood stack. The top pieces look dry, but those near the floor are damp from melted snow and boots. Emil selects thin pine spits and carries them to the stove. The red-bearded man takes the lamp and inspects the woodpile. Only a few pieces remain. "Lo," he says. Pete looks toward the door. The main supply sits outside beneath the lean-to. No one speaks for a moment. The storm presses against the walls as if listening. A trip of perhaps 20 steps should be simple. Tonight, the path is buried. Wind drives snow through the clearing. The door brace must be removed, then replaced. One man stepping outside alone could lose sight of the building within seconds. Amos begins pulling on his boots. "I'll go." Pete points to another man. "Tom with you." "Rope." The decision is immediate. Logging crews commonly use rope lines in severe weather when moving between camp buildings. A line tied from doorway to woodpile. Barn or cookhouse allows men to keep contact when blowing snow erases familiar landmarks. Such precautions sound excessive until visibility drops to the length of an outstretched arm. Tom drags on his coat. Amos finds a coil of rope beneath the bench. One end is already knotted around an iron ring beside the door, suggesting this is not the first night the camp has needed it. Pete removes the timber brace. The door rattles before he touches the latch. Ready. Amos wraps the rope around one mitten. Tom grips it behind him. Pete lifts the latch. Wind explodes into the oven. Snow sweeps across the floor in a white burst. The lamp flame bends nearly flat inside its chimney. Several men pull blankets over their faces. Amos steps out. Tom follows. They vanish beyond the doorway at once. Pete forces the door shut and replaces the brace. Snow lies scattered across the floorboards, already melting where the room retains a little heat. You stare at the door. The rope runs beneath it through a small gap near the threshold. It moves steadily, then it stops. No one says anything. Pete returns to the stove. He opens the ash pan and clears it with a small shovel. Fine grey dust rises. The fresh airflow reaches the coals, and a few points brighten from dull red to orange. Emil kneels beside him with the kindling. Pete arranges the thin pieces carefully, leaving space between them. He adds a twist of newspaper from Emil's boot supply. The article inside appears to concern a governor. Tonight. The governor's speech has found practical purpose. Pete lights the paper from a surviving coal. The edge blackens. A small flame appears, flickers, then goes out. The room releases a collective breath of disappointment. A lesser-known fire-starting method in some camps uses a twist of birch bark kept dry inside a coat or box. Birch bark contains oils that help it catch even when the outer surface feels damp. Pete reaches into a tin near the stove and removes several curled strips. So the camp possesses emergency luxury after all. He slides the bark beneath the pine splits. This time, the flame takes. It creeps along the pale curl, brightens, and touches the kindling. Thin wood begins snapping softly. Pete does not add a large log yet. He waits. The rope beneath the door jerks twice. The men look up. Pete removes the brace. A heavy thump strikes the outside of the door. He pulls it open. Amos and Tom stumble inside carrying armloads of split hardwood. Snow covers their shoulders, hats, and eyebrows. Amos has a branch caught through the back of his coat. Tom is laughing, though his face looks strained. They drop the wood beside the stove. Pete shuts the door. The brace returns. Amos pulls the branch free and examines it. Forrest tried to keep me. Didn't want you, Tom says. The laughter that follows is quiet but genuine. Fear releases itself through sarcasm, because no one wishes to admit how little could be seen outside. Fresh wood arrives in several trips. Amos and Tom follow the rope each time, carrying only what they can manage without losing grip. Snow enters with them. Cold enters. The cabin temperature falls further before it can improve. You leave your bunk and help move the new pieces away from the wet floor. The wood is dense, likely maple or birch. Better for a long, steady burn than resinous pine. Your fingers ache through the blanket wrapped around your shoulders. Pete feeds the stove gradually. Kindling first, then a narrow split, then another. The fire begins drawing upward with a firm, low roar. Smoke still leaks into the room, but less than before. The stovepipe warms. A ticking sound runs along the metal as it expands. Everyone watches the chimney collar. No smoke appears there. Good! Then you see the same men lifting a trapped horse together, passing food across a table, and holding a rope in a storm. Human beings remain inconveniently complicated, even when wearing matching wool. Later historians have offered competing pictures of camp society. One view emphasizes a rough democracy created by shared labor, where competence matters more than class. Another points to ethnic ranking, unequal wages, bullying, and company control. The surviving evidence supports both, depending on the camp, the season, and whose memories were preserved. People later writing about the Great Logging Era often disagree on how men understood the forest they cut. Some portray them as careless destroyers who saw only profit. Others describe workers who knew trees, soil, weather, and animals with intimate skill, even while serving an industry that stripped entire districts. Both images can exist together. A person may understand a landscape deeply and still participate in changing it beyond recognition. You stand among men who read the forest carefully because their lives depend on it. Yet the trees will still fall when the weather clears. The road crew turns back toward camp, widening the path as it goes. Daylight now spreads fully across the clearing. The storm clouds are thinning in the west, where a narrow band of pale sky appears above the treetops. The bunkhouse looks smaller in morning light. Smoke rises more cleanly from its chimney. Snow reaches nearly to the lower window frame. The doorway has been dug free, and a wall of shoveled snow stands on either side of the steps. You stop near the place where you first entered the clearing last night. The supply road behind you has vanished. No sleigh tracks remain. No footprints show where you stumbled beside the horses. The storm has covered every sign of your arrival. For a moment, the camp seems completely separated from the rest of the world, a cluster of warm rooms surrounded by silent timber. Then the sun finds the snow. A weak silver brightness spreads across the open ground. Ice crystals glitter. The barn roof shines. Every branch carries a white edge. Men pause without admitting they have paused. Even the foreman looks toward the trees. The beauty is not soft or harmless. It is built from cold, weight, distance, and risk. Still, it holds the clearing in a rare quiet. You hear the dog panting. A harness bell rings near the barn. From the cookhouse chimney comes the faint smell of wood smoke and perhaps bread. Your wet gloves are stiffening, so you flex your fingers and continue toward the bunkhouse. The door opens before you reach it. Warm air touches your face. Inside waits the iron stove, the narrow bunk, the folded blanket, and all the smells you now recognize. Wool, leather, smoke, pine tar, coffee lingering on someone's breath. Only one night has passed. Yet the cabin no longer feels entirely strange. You know which bucket holds drinking water. You know not to take Niels's peg. You know how the roof sounds when snow slides from it, how the stove sounds when the draft weakens, and how 30 sleeping men create a weather system of their own. You step inside and stamp the snow from your boots. Behind you, the forest brightens under its heavy white covering. Ahead, the day begins, and somewhere deep beneath your tiredness, you carry the quiet knowledge that you have passed through the storm, not by defeating it, but by accepting the shelter, rules, work, food, warmth, and company that allowed everyone to endure together. The cabin door closes softly. The sounds of axes and shovels fade. Your breathing becomes slower now. The hard wooden room begins to drift away, its edges softening like tracks beneath new snow. You no longer need to feel the shovel in your hands. You no longer need to test the wind or watch the branches overhead. The road crew continues without you, moving gently into the pale morning while you remain warm, quiet, and safely beyond the reach of the storm. The iron stove settles into a steady glow. Its small clicks grow farther apart. The bunkhouse walls lose their roughness. The smoke thins. The crowded bunks become shadowed shapes, calm and still, each holding a sleeper beneath a heavy wool blanket. Outside, the last flakes turn slowly in the air. They fall onto the roof, the barn, the road, and the deep forest floor. They cover the axe marks, smooth the drifts, and rest on every dark branch without sound. The camp grows smaller in your mind. Lanterns dim behind frosted glass. The cookhouse bell becomes distant. The horses stand quietly in their warm stalls. Even the wind seems tired now, breathing softly among the pines. You can let the night go. You can leave the narrow bunk, the scratchy blanket, the frozen boots, and the groaning roof behind. Nothing needs to be repaired. Nothing needs to be carried. No one is calling you into the cold. The forest remains, calm and immense, holding the little timber camp beneath a sky that is slowly clearing. And as the final chimney smoke rises through the snowy branches, you rest more deeply, letting every sound become softer, every image become lighter, until there is only warmth, stillness, and the quiet whisper of snow settling over the sleeping woods. Sweet dreams.